Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Social Work Bubble podcast. I'm your host, Laura. I'm in LCSW here in New York. Today, we are joined by Emma Yeager, a fellow social worker. Welcome, Emma.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited to have you. Today, we are getting into Emma's experience in school and social work programs. I think it's a pretty relatable, universal experience with just kind of gaps in our education, getting support or not getting support in internships and for students. So I'm really excited to have you on. Emma, do you want to just introduce yourself to the listeners, including like your background and what you're currently doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I graduated with my Bachelor's of Social Work in December of 2022 from Stephen F.
Woohoo!
Austin State University. And then I went on and pursued my Master's of Social Work with a concentration in mental health and substance abuse from the University of Texas, Arlington. And I just recently graduated with that in May. So
Yay!
yes, it's super exciting. And I just recently passed my licensure exam. And so right now I'm waiting on my licensure to get approved. So in the meantime, I'm working a part-time job at a local coffee shop while I wait for all of that to kind of go through and then kind of start on my job search, which I'm really excited to do.
Amazing. Wow. Before we dive in, what kind of like job are you looking for? What feels good for you right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am really interested in the hospital or hospice setting right now. I
Awesome.
had an internship in my bachelor's with hospice and I loved it. And so I'm really looking into that area as well as like maybe a dialysis clinic potential opportunity that might open up for me. Something in the medical setting is what I'm really interested in to start out because I feel like it's a really good area to start out and prepares you for a lot of the different sects of social work that you can go into later in life.
Absolutely. Wow. How exciting.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, we'll be talking about kind of experiences in school and in the social work program. Can you just give us an overview of what your experience was, including like the highs and lows of it and what you saw?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my bachelor's program, I would say that experience was a really positive experience. I had great professors, great other fellow students that I could connect with, and they really prepared me very well for the academic side of things. So I think they prepared me very well for going into grad school, such as things of how to write a paper, how to format a paper, how to
Mm-hmm.
formulate sources, those types of things. But as far as the more basic skills that make social work social work,
Right.
that area was a bit lacking. And then when I went on into my master's, I was really excited. I decided to change schools just to see if I could get maybe better quality experience as far as learning those
Mm-hmm.
skills go. And I was really excited to specialize. And I'm really happy that I went on and specialized. I think that was a really positive experience.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it was still lacking in some of those basic social work type skills that I think we really need. And I don't know if this varies from program to program, but I personally would love a class on like
Mm-hmm.
how to how to deal with insurance, how to help your clients set up government, for
That would be
government programs. Like,
incredible.
yeah. And that's kind of what I was looking for as far as like how to implement certain therapies. And
Mm-hmm.
that's just not the experience that I personally received from my grad school. But
Mm-hmm.
overall, I'm really happy that I did pursue my master's because I think it will do me really well in the long run. And I'm very fortunate that I had that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't regret it. I just wish that some things were a bit different in the education area.
Yeah, kind of that practical piece because I think you're 100% right. That is something, especially when it comes to like billing and insurance, which is a huge part of us being able to get paid for the work that we're doing, but is a huge factor in people being able to afford like the treatment that we're providing in the first place. And that's
Yes.
like that can be such an uncomfortable conversation to have, especially if you've never been trained in like how to have that conversation and like and what that could look like. It's crazy.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Wow. Great points. I've had a similar experience where I don't know, I remember in I think many undergrad programs have a more generalist approach and you don't really get specialized until grad school, which I guess is fine, but grad school is expensive. Like I get, like if people aren't able to go further,
Yes,
you only have a very general like knowledge base. And then in
right.
grad school, I mean, you get a pathway and you can specialize, but I was the clinical social work route and I still only had maybe two classes that were a specific intervention, like a motivational interviewing class and a class on CBT. And those were helpful, but those were also like electives still. Like you had to choose to take it. They weren't really a
Yes,
part of like the actual curriculum. So it's just odd because I remember
yes.
my job when I just most recently worked at a private practice, I was talking to another therapist and we were both like, yeah, no one ever teaches you how to be a therapist. It is just like diving in, fingers crossed, hoping for the best.
Yes, yes, that's so true. And there was a lot of book reading on these
Hmm.
modalities, but I wish that we could have a class where it's like, okay, we're gonna like role play, like you're gonna be the client, I'm gonna be the
Hmm.
therapist, and this is how we're actually gonna go about implementing these types of treatment modalities. I think that could be
Yeah,
super, super beneficial.
that'd be huge. Wow. Because that is the thing too, where I think in a lot of field placements, like I had to do process recordings. I think that's what they're called and all that. But that was still like, it's very different than someone actually like watching how you show up and what you're doing. And it's
Yes,
obviously uncomfortable, like to pretend to be in a session or with a client in front of someone is
yes.
so uncomfortable, but that is also how you build those skills and those muscles there.
Oh, absolutely. And in my undergrad, I had one class where we did do um, kind of more of a like role play style. I'm interviewing you, you're the client, and we would do it
Hmm.
in front of the class. Everyone would be paired with a classmate and take turns. And that was
Yeah.
great. It was very beneficial, but I just wish we had more of that and more
Yeah.
role playing of those very real life scenarios, real life questions that clients are going to ask you
Hmm.
and maybe even catch you off guard a bit. So
Yeah.
that could be very beneficial, I think.
I love that. Oh my goodness. Very cool. Now, I'm wondering, how am I framing this? In your experience, like in your field placement, internship, whatever you want to call it, um, was there anything that was lacking there that looking back, you were just like, oof, this could have been a lot better for me had like X, Y, or Z been there?
Right. For my field placements, I feel like, especially for my bachelor's one, I got really lucky in that I had a wonderful supervisor
Hmm.
who really took the time to sit down with me and the other person that was interning with me and walk us through, this is how you're going to do an assessment. These are some interview skills. This is how you're going to handle this type of situation.
Yeah.
And I think that could have also been very beneficial for my master's as well, because I worked with
Hmm.
two very different populations. In my bachelor's, as I mentioned, I did hospice. And then when I went on to my master's internship, I was at a state hospital that was largely
Hmm.
forensic. So very, very different type of population,
Yeah.
very different skill sets that you're going to need. And I
Hmm.
think that was what was lacking a bit. I had two different supervisors at that placement, and one was great, got along great, and the other one we didn't mesh as well. She was
Hmm.
still good at her job, we just didn't mesh as well, and I think I really could have benefited from more guidance, especially in that specific population setting of this is how you're going to sit down and interview with this person, or how to lead groups. That was a huge thing of leading groups with that population and
Yeah.
teaching them social skills, living skills for
Hmm.
once they're out into the world. That could have been very beneficial, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely. Oh, groups, leading a group.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's something that's so scary. I think in my master's level field placement, I was at an outpatient mental health clinic and like my supervisor wanted me to run a group, so I just had to like come up with something and run it. And it was like,
Yes.
there was like no guidance as to like what it actually means to lead a
Yes.
group. And
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
remember reading about like the theory, like, oh, this is
Yeah.
like, especially as I prepped for my licensing exam, like this is the
Right.
theory behind a
Yes.
group and, oh, the
Yes.
forming of a group and like, and that kind of stuff. But
Yes.
in terms of actually like leading it and having it be productive, I was just like, okay, like,
Yes.
here's like a prompt. What do you think? And it was just, uh, it was crazy. I mean, there's a benefit, I think, to being thrown in and just like diving
Absolutely.
into an
Yeah.
experience, but you need support still, it's
Oh,
almost just
absolutely.
like wearing a life jacket. Like certainly like being thrown into the ocean, fine if you're wearing a life jacket, but if
Yes.
you don't know how to swim, you're just hoping for the best.
Oh,
It can get a little
absolutely.
crazy.
Oh, absolutely. And I wanted it to be beneficial for the clients as well. I wanted them
Yeah.
to get something out of it, and I felt like I wasn't prepared well for how to best benefit those clients in that
Hmm.
group setting, as well
Yeah.
as just navigating questions that would come up or conflicts that would come up. Because as you said, I learned a lot about the theories. Social work does a great job at educating you on the theories
Yeah.
and the history, which is great, and you need those foundations, but the actual skill building process is where I think it's lacking, to be
Hmm.
honest.
Yeah. Because a lot of clients don't care about theory,
Yeah,
like it's a great framework for us, but
yes,
in terms of just like being, like meeting other humans where they are, I don't think they care. They have bigger fish
yeah,
to fry.
yeah, absolutely. And when am I really ever gonna say, if a client's in crisis or upset with me about something, when am I gonna say, well, this is happening because of this theory? Like that's not really the most helpful thing at that moment, I
Hmm.
feel like, to that client, you
Hmm.
know? Because I think if that was turned around on me and somebody said that to me, I'd be like, that's not really that's not really the issue here. That's not
Yeah.
really the information I need to
That's
know
not the
right now.
point. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so true. Now, in supervision specifically, what are things that you've noticed are really helpful, or what things do you look for in supervision?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I look for in supervision is somebody that is in it for the passion. They're not just in it because this is what they have to do. This is their job. This is their paycheck. But
Yeah.
someone who is in it because they want you to learn and do well in social work. And then
Hmm.
they also care very much about the clients that they're serving and that their clients are doing well. So I really look for somebody that can teach me how to be a better empathetic social
Hmm.
worker,
Yeah.
as well as someone who's willing to sit down with me and have those conversations about the clients that I'm serving, about what the process has been like for
Hmm.
me, because I came into my internships with pretty much no experience other than my education background
Hmm.
working with the hospice and the state hospital population. And so getting exposed to that for the first time can be kind of jarring. And
Yeah.
so I think it's really important to have a supervisor that is willing to walk with you through that process and allow
Hmm.
you to come to them in a non-judgmental way and just process what you're going through and ask your questions without feeling like, oh, should I ask this? Should I already know this? And process your experience and validate what you're going through. Because it
Hmm.
can take a big emotional toll, especially when you've got your grad school, you've got your internship, you're trying to work your job, probably
Right.
trying to remain some resemblance of a little bit of a social life and a self-care aspect. And it can
Hmm.
take a really significant emotional toll. So I think what I look for in a supervisor is somebody that is going to have my back the entire
Hmm.
time.
Yeah. I love that. I have this one horror story of supervision when I was again in my master's level internship. That really
Yes,
that was something.
yes,
Um, I remember the first semester just feeling like a little lost because I was obviously doing like clinical social work. I was kind of thrown into this place and I wasn't getting a lot of referrals, so it was having a hard time
Right.
building my caseload. And I get to the evaluation point at the end of the semester, and my supervisor, who has not shown me a lot of support or anything, like we would meet for maybe 30 minutes,
Yeah.
maybe every other week, and it was just like, what? What?
Yes.
Um, so I didn't really, I was lost. And she's telling me we're going over my evaluation and she kind of was just like berating me and it's like, you just have no initiative and like this and this and this. And I was so shocked because I'm over
Yeah.
here thinking, oh, I'm doing well, like
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
doing what I think I'm supposed to be doing.
Right.
And never once had she ever raised any other concern in any other meeting we ever had. But we're just waiting until you have to submit evaluations to my school? That's crazy. And I'm such a passive person. Like I really don't like confrontation, but that
Yeah.
was a moment I just had to like deal with it and kind of be like, hey, like I'm sure in somewhere I can get where you're coming from. I would have loved to have this feedback 3 months ago. And like that did not
Absolutely.
happen.
Yes.
And it was just, and that was a pattern I think with this particular supervisor is just like, I think she was also overwhelmed. She's also in the system,
Yes.
of outpatient mental health, but it was also
Yeah.
like, it was just a crazy time. And I think that was a moment where when I came to my job after I eventually left that agency, I almost like didn't believe it was a real job because it was like such a supportive environment and my supervisor was just like, how are you doing? Like
Yeah.
what's coming up for, and like actually getting into the nitty gritty of like what this work can do. And I'm like, oh, this is what supervision is supposed to be.
Yes.
Wow. What do you know?
Yes.
It's crazy.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness.
Oh, what do you notice? I don't like to make generalizations, but we're going to. What do you notice are some of those factors of like bad supervision or where there's not really that support, specifically for students too? Like where do you see that?
Yeah, I think bad supervision for students and what I've seen is a supervisor that I think forgets that the student is still a student and they're
Mm,
still to learn
yeah.
and the guidance and support. And a lot of them, this is their first time really navigating a situation like that.
Hmm.
And as we said before, there can be benefit into being kind of just thrown in there and figuring it out on your own. But I think the point of a supervisor is to supervise and to
Right.
provide the guidance. And so what I've seen is the supervisor doesn't recognize that the student is still a student.
Hmm.
The student may be dealing with their own things on the side as well, their own personal life. They have their
Yeah.
personal things, whether it's, mental health, family, and also still trying to navigate holding down a lot of us holding down a job and grad school and
Hmm.
internships. Internships are like a full-time job that you're not getting paid for
Yeah.
social workers.
Which is a
And
whole other thing.
the whole other thing. And I think they really forget that. And I think they forget what a significant
Mm,
toll that can take on a student's mental health. And so I think there's a, a lack of support
hmm.
in supporting your interns in their mental health journey as they go through this
Hmm.
exposure for the first time for a lot of them in their internships. So
Yeah, absolutely. Because there is so much, I mean, it's hard, especially when you're new to it. And yeah, I just remember like, I think there's just a lot of pressure too, because you've just been drilled with these theories and these frameworks and all this information,
yeah,
and now you're actually doing the work. And
yeah,
it's just overwhelming because I think there can be a lot of
yeah,
overthinking. I spoke to like so many people who had imposter syndrome. It was just like,
absolutely.
I have no idea what I'm doing. Like I shouldn't be
Yes,
doing this. And that's like such a key moment that I think can set the tone for people to kind of be like, you're fine. Like you're
yes,
good. You're just new in this and it's a lot.
yeah, absolutely. And I think a good supervisor helps you figure out kind of the type of social worker that you want to be. And in bad supervision, they kind of just, I feel like from my experience, they kind of expect you to already know, you
Right.
know, well, you should already know this because you're in grad school. Okay, but I wasn't working with a specific population in a specific
Hmm.
role during my grad school necessarily. This is what internship is for, to help me learn. And
Yeah.
along with that, I would say, in my experience, a bad supervisor is one that kind of disregards maybe potential safety issues and things like that
Hmm.
with an intern, because working in kind of a high stakes environment such as a state
Hmm.
hospital, there's a lot of safety concerns that
Oh
go into
yeah.
that. And when you're being exposed to that for the first time, especially as a 5 foot small little Indian woman,
Right.
really working in a state hospital with men that were in their 50s and beyond, it was pretty intimidating,
Hmm.
and there were certainly some safety issues that came up. And when you feel like your supervisor doesn't really acknowledge the safety aspect for you,
Hmm.
that can really be a very difficult thing to go through.
Mm, that's very true. It's interesting because I feel like that. Oh, sorry, I'm congested. Um, I see that happen. I think in social workers that are like really jaded, like they've
Yeah.
they've been in the work for a few years or many years, and it's the same type of people that are just like, well, this work just sucks, and you'll burn out, and you won't get paid, and it's like, why are you doing this job then? Like that's a crazy attitude to have, and yeah, I mean, it's tough because I do know, at least with students, there's only so much that you can do with your supervisor. Like
Right.
when I had my issue with my supervisor, I went to it wasn't a faculty advisor. It was someone else. There's like two different people. You have like your school field person and then like your actual practice person.
Yes.
So I went to the school person, and she was kind of like, okay, well, you can kind of approach it this way. Like we talked about
Yeah.
me trying to communicate to my supervisor,
Right.
but it also like wasn't a thing where it was like necessary for anyone else to step in. It was just like this
Right.
really weird spot. And I'm like, okay, now this is just like uncomfortable and that's it. So it's odd. It's, yeah,
Yeah.
but it worked out.
Good. I'm glad it did.
It,
Yes.
it did work out. I think you have more say over supervision, I think, when you're in the field and working.
Yeah. I think that
I
is,
mean, I think some places offer supervision for free, and that might be uncomfortable to be like, I don't want you to be my supervisor.
right.
But there's more flexibility to kind of be like, oh, I'm receiving supervision from this other person and
Yes,
all that,
absolutely.
versus like a student kind of being like, oh, well, this is just where I am.
Yes.
And the search for another supervisor being all on a student is a whole other thing. Like just a lot. It's a lot to go through.
It is a lot to
Mm.
go through. Yeah. And with my bachelor's supervisor, it was great. I was doing home visits because it was hospice,
Mm.
which can also be kind of
Oh,
intimidating at first. But
definitely.
with him, I knew if I called him, he would be there, or he'd say, "Come
Mm.
back to the office, let's talk about this," if something were to happen.
Oh, that's
But in
great.
my master's, I didn't feel like I had that same level of support.
Hmm.
And I think that was really a disservice, to be
Yeah,
honest. Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. Because we are learning. I think that's such an important thing that you mentioned is especially when we're talking about your experience in school, you are a student. Like the expectation to know everything and to be able just to like show up and be a seasoned social worker is
Yeah.
so ridiculous. Like, I think people already put so much pressure on themselves to do that. Like that
Yes.
supervisor, I think, is someone that can be really grounding and compassionate and help people like work through that imposter syndrome and kind of be like, this is fine. Like this is just normal for where you are
Yes.
and like the timeline that you're at. You're at the very beginning of the timeline and you're just learning a lot of information right now.
Yes, absolutely. So,
I'm wondering too, this is something we talked about when we initially met, but we have the good old code of ethics.
yes.
What are some ethical considerations that you think supervisors need to be more mindful of? Because I also think supervisors forget they are still held to ethical standards in supervision.
Yes, absolutely. So my first one would be the potential safety and liability issues, to be honest. I think that's
Absolutely.
huge and that's very important for supervisors to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think just kind of as we've talked about of just you're in a position as a supervisor where your job is to ensure that who you're supervising is benefiting from that supervision
Yeah.
and that you're holding yourself to an ethical standard that you would want your own supervisor to hold themselves to. And so that your intern can learn what does an ethical supervisor and what does ethical supervision look like.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big one for me. And I know we talk a lot in supervision and ethical standards and maintaining boundaries and things like that, which is also very important. I think it's important to be able to have a relaxed conversational environment with your supervisor, but it's also important that the supervisor themselves doesn't get too comfortable in their job that they're divulging a lot of their personal stuff to their supervisee as well. I think that's also huge. And those are just some things that I've seen in my experience as a supervisee. So.
That is very true because I know lines can start to blur where it still is a professional relationship. And I think it's obviously awesome to have empathy and to have like context for someone's situation, but it can get dicey when there's just a lot of like personal stuff out there, especially when it's like the supervisor detailing that to the supervisee. That can start to get weird.
Yeah, it can get a little awkward.
Yeah. Sometimes it's also like, all right. Like, it's just, I don't know. Like, I've noticed for some people, this is a conversation I think that came up in grad school, is that line between, like, supervision and therapy, where some people, even if, like, the roles end up being reversed and it's the supervisor being the one that's dumping a lot of stuff, obviously some of these things can certainly come up and affect your work, and you might have, like, a client that brings up, like, personal things for you, and those are things you want to talk about. But there is still that line, and it still is a professional relationship.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's very important to keep in mind. So,
yeah. Good practice for working with clients, too.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. Has there been anything else you've noticed that you'd really like to see social work programs do or change so that way they are more effective for students and prepare them better?
Oh, absolutely. My first thing I would probably say is helping you get prepared for the licensure process.
Oh, huge.
I don't know about your experience, but mine didn't really give me any guidance at all. It was very much like, you need to get licensed. That's it.
Yeah.
You know? And being licensed in the master's level, especially in the state that I'm in, is pretty important. There's a lot of job opportunities where you're kind of required to have your licensed master's social worker. And so I was like, okay, I need to get licensed, but where do I even start? You know, my head was spinning, and thankfully I had a good network of other social workers I could reach out to and just be like, hey, like, what do you recommend? Yeah. But no help really came from my own program of like, here's the website for your state that you need to go to apply for the license, and here's some things that maybe you should study on for your licensure exam. This is what you should know going into your exam, and this is what the process of how long it's going to take to get approved and finalized in your license. None of that was really provided to me, and I would have also loved to see even some practice tests or something provided, or just like practice
Yeah.
questions. Maybe a class just for that could be really helpful.
Yeah.
Of just something that focuses on, hey, these are some things you
Hmm.
need to know. This is how to answer those questions for your exam, because it's a big exam. It's just,
Big
and
exam.
it's a lot of money. And
Hmm.
so it would be great to have more preparedness in that area. And as well, I think in the education area, it would be great to have more education on just the different sects of social work in general, because there's
Hmm.
so many areas you can go to and so many diverse populations you can work with, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons why I chose it, because I was, wow, there's so many different things I could do in this field. But
Hmm.
I think we commonly hear CPS, at least in where I'm at, CPS is largely talked about,
Yeah.
but it's hard to really know about any other potential social work opportunities that are out there.
Hmm.
And a lot of that learning I had to kind of do on my own of just like, oh wow, there's social workers here, social workers
Hmm.
there, And I think it
Yeah.
would be really great to have some kind of class or even like do like field trips to different areas and like shadow a
Hmm.
social worker for a day um or even like how nurses do like their clinicals and they'll rotate
Yeah.
it. I think
Hmm.
that'd be great for social
I
workers
would love
because
that.
because our internships are great, but it's we're in the same place the entire semester
Hmm.
or 2 semesters or however long your internship was. And that's great. You get a lot of experience with that one population, but I think it would be very beneficial to have
Hmm.
experience with all the populations. That way you can really know before you decide, like, hey, this is what I really want to pursue.
Hmm.
I just think that could be very helpful.
Yeah. I'm with you. Love that idea because it is also, I was thinking about too, I think often we always just say, oh, there's so much you can do in social work without actually like getting into the specifics of like, okay, like
Yes.
what? What can
Yes.
you do with this degree? And being
Oh,
able to actually like meet people who have like used social work degrees in different ways or like maybe transition in their career or progressed up the social work ladder, like whatever that is. Because I've
yes.
noticed too, I love to hear stories from social workers, hence my podcast. Also just about like how they got to where they are in their career. Because I think so often we don't even realize like, okay, I have this goal to like be a forensic social worker or a school social worker, but what does that specifically look like in social work? Because
Yes.
do I just need the degree and that's it? Like what
Right.
exactly is required there? And I think that's a piece that's missing is because you can do so much with social work, there are also many different paths to get different places. And it can be hard to kind
Absolutely.
of figure out, okay, well, what are all the pieces of my puzzle that I need in order to move forward? Because
Yeah.
there's just almost so much information and not enough at the same time.
Yes, absolutely. And it can be very overwhelming, especially post
Hmm.
grad. I think it can be like, okay, well, I'm interested in this area, but how
Yeah.
do I get to this area? And especially in pursuing your clinical license, like, what
Mm.
do I do for that? I'm not in
Yeah.
school anymore, so what are the steps I need to take to pursue my clinical license when I
Hmm.
choose to do so? So I think that could be a wonderful change made to any social work
Hmm.
programs of just implementing more of that kind of knowledge. And
Hmm.
even like you said, like hearing from other social workers, having other social workers come in and speak could be super
Yeah.
beneficial on what their road was like for their LBSW, LMSW, or
Hmm.
LCSW. I think that would be great. I know I would have loved that.
Yeah.
I think we had like one speaker in my undergrad
Oh, wow.
who came and taught. Um, and in my undergrad, we were in a very rural area,
Hmm.
and I loved the close knit up part of it, but I do think it would have been great to go to a bigger area where maybe more
Sure.
resources could have been available. So sometimes I wonder how that would have differed for me if I went to a school in a bigger area.
Mm. Fair enough. There are different resources depending on what you go. And I mean, this is a whole other hang up of mine, but things being different based on what state you are in is also
Yes.
just nuts. Like,
Yes.
that's such a hassle for people, especially if you're going to a school out of state and you're wanting to, like, it's just, it makes it hard to
Yes.
get information, like comprehensive information together for someone who's trying to be like, okay, well, this is what I want to do. How do I do it? Oh, but I live in a different state. How does that work? And it's just a mess.
Yes, I would love information on all that, as well as just how how much the licensure process varies across state to state and the
Yeah.
requirements.
Hmm.
What do I need to do if I want to move to Virginia and work a
Hmm.
job, but I've got a Texas licensure? What are the steps I need to make to
Yeah.
do that? Would be would be great to know, I
Hmm.
think.
I'm
But it
with you.
varies so much.
Yeah. Because
And
all that to me also falls into professional development. And that is
yes,
something where I feel like we're we're always told like, yeah, professional development, continuing education, like always like keep working on yourself, this and this and that. But that's kind of missed out on, especially in like student life, to kind of
yes.
start that foundation of, okay, this is professional development. Like these are the things that are out there.
Oh, absolutely. And I think I did my master's program through an online program. And it was great because it allowed me the flexibility that I needed to work and I didn't have to uproot
Hmm.
my life and move somewhere else. But I wish sometimes that I would have gone in person because I think there
Hmm.
probably would have been more professional development opportunities because it was
Sure.
in a bigger city. And I wish I could have just had more opportunities to network and to
Hmm.
find out about things that are out there and to build skills, go to trainings, conferences,
Yeah.
things like that. And another thing of social work that I would love to know a little bit more on
Hmm.
is the CEU part because we talk
Oh,
so much about the CEUs in school,
true.
but I'm like, okay, now how do I get those? When do I need to get those? How many do I need?
Hmm.
When do I need to start? Um, that would be a really beneficial course,
That
I think, to have.
That would be great because I'm
Yeah.
realizing right now, like I just got my clinical license and so I'm supposed to, at least in New York State, you don't have to start doing continuing education until you have your LC. I still don't even know the specifics. I'm
Yeah.
just like floating around, just going with the flow. That's
Yeah.
so crazy. Because also, I mean, that stuff is also another expense too. You would
Oh,
think you want to actually figure out, okay, well, this is what I need. This is how much it'll cost. Can I
right.
work at a spot that'll cover that? Is like, what
Yes,
will that look like?
absolutely.
There's a lot of questions.
Yes. And I think about that a lot because now with the internet and everything, it's like, okay, well, I can get CEUs online, which is great. But then I'm like, well, how
Hmm.
do I know what are reputable CEUs? What's
Yeah,
coming from a reliable source?
right.
What's gonna qualify? I just think about that a lot, and it would be great to find a job that would provide me with those, but
Hmm.
I don't know what the likelihood of that would be. So
Wow. Wow. Well, Emma, as
yeah.
we wrap up, what is just one piece of advice you would give to the fellow social workers listening?
I think if I were to give any advice to the fellow social workers, it would be for those that are just starting out in your field or maybe you're post grad, it would be to just take your time. I think I personally rushed a lot of it because I
Mm-hmm.
felt behind. I was comparing myself to a lot of other people and I felt bad about myself and I just wanted to get
Hmm.
my degree.
Yeah.
And of course I'm glad that I did, but I wish I would have taken my time more so to really, really research more about social work itself, about the process itself, the requirements you need to meet, as well as the schools and what they offer and what would be the most beneficial for what I want to do in my
Hmm.
future. And so right now I'm post grad and I am currently trying to take that time because I I didn't, I think, in the beginning. So as I said, I'm
Mm.
working at the coffee shop right now, and I'm just using this time as I wait for my licensure to get approved to just really think about who am I outside of school and what things do I really want to pursue now that I have this degree, and
Yeah.
take my time to really think through that before I just commit to a job for the next however many years
Hmm.
it's going to be. And I think I compare myself a lot, and so sometimes I beat myself up about that of like, oh, I should already be working. I should already be in a
Mm.
job, have a job lined up. But also I think it's okay because
Hmm.
I just finished grad school. That's huge. I
Yeah.
think it's okay to take my time to breathe a little bit. And if I
Mm-hmm.
could go back and tell myself or tell other social workers starting in this field, I would tell them, breathe, take your time,
Mm-hmm.
go to school when you feel is right for you, and go to a school that you feel like will meet your needs education wise that you want
Yeah.
to get out of. And then I think for social workers that have already been in the field, I would say to remember what it was like to first start out for the
Mm-hmm.
people that are coming in, and to have grace as well as empower those social workers as they come in.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Lovely advice. Things that we all need to hear.
Yeah,
Good. Now, Emma, thank you so much for coming on. Where can the listeners keep up with you?
absolutely. So they are more than welcome to follow me on my Instagram. It is emma.grace.yeager, and I would love to have you there.
Wonderful. Well, that sounds great. All that stuff will be linked below for those listening, so you can go ahead and follow Emma. Thank you all so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, like, follow, do your thing, and we will see you next time. Thank you, Emma.
Thank you.